Goldrick and Martin S. Goldrick.
Today is December 3rd, 2009. My name is Terry Wainwright from Lest We Forget. We're at Lake Michigan College in Benton Harbor, Michigan. We'll be talking to Martin Goldrick. We'll be gathering information for the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. Let's kind of start at the beginning. What year were you born in?
1946. I was born in Washington, D.C. We lived there about 3 years. My dad was in the Internal Revenue Service, and then we began to move around the country. My mother was a vagabond, a gene that I also inherited, unfortunately for my wife. We lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico, spent about 10 years there, then moved out to California, lived in San Diego area for 3 years, then moved back to Albuquerque, then moved back to Washington, D.C., where I went to high school in Fairfax, Virginia. Then went down to the University of Virginia, and that's where I graduated from college.
What branch of service were you in, and what was your highest rank?
I was in the Marine Corps. I was a first lieutenant officially. I actually, after I got out, I got promoted to captain in the Marine Corps Reserves, but I never got the official certification from the president that I was a captain. So in the records it shows first lieutenant.
Was any of your family in the military?
Both of my parents, my father and mother, were in the Navy during World War II. My mother, interestingly, she's never talked about it, but she was actually a secretary in the Waves, and she was with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and was actually in the war room, often transcribing minutes from those meetings. And my dad was a courier. He was with FDR at Yalta, Malta, a couple of those big conferences. So we had strong Navy belief in our background.
And how did you get in the military? Why did you decide to?
Kind of an interesting story. In a way, I was a reluctant warrior. Certainly not reluctant to serve the country, because both of my parents had. But in 1965, I was in college. I was in between starting my sophomore year in college and freshman year. Our Congress started talking about, well, Vietnam was just really getting rolling, and Congress was talking about ending a draft deferment that we had if we were in college. And when I started hearing noise about ending the deferment, I thought, well, I do not want to be drafted. I don't want to be drafted and go into the Army as a private. If I go, I'd like to go in as an officer somewhere. The Marine Corps had a program, still does, called a Platoon Leaders Class, PLC. You could sign up in your sophomore year of college, go to boot camp, and it literally was boot camp. All of the beatings that you hear about, not physical beatings, psychological and all the hard physical stress were part of it. 6 weeks in your sophomore summer, and then go back for 6 more weeks in your junior year, and then you'd be commissioned upon graduation. And so I elected to pursue that program. Went to boot camp at Quantico, Virginia, in the sophomore year of college, and back again in the junior year of college. Then in 1968, when I graduated, I received my commission as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. From there, we went on to basic school, what they call basic school, at Quantico, Virginia. That was 6 months of training in how to be an officer, but also military tactics, how to lead a platoon, all of the weapons that the Marine Corps fires. The officers had to learn to fire all of the weapons. So it's very extensive, lots of compass reading, orienteering, nighttime marches, and those kinds of activities, preparing you to lead a platoon, an infantry platoon, and that was for every officer. Several of my classmates were actually from the Naval Academy, took the Marine option to become pilots, jet pilots, helicopter pilots, and so forth. But we all went through the same basic infantry, officer infantry training.
And so then you went back to school, graduated.
Graduated, was commissioned, then went right on into the Marine Corps, and spent 6 months in that officer training. And when I said I was a reluctant warrior, at that time, when I signed up in the beginning, Vietnam was just, was being talked about. It was the first start of the escalation. I thought we'd be in and out of there by 1966 or 1967. I had no idea that we would be there when I graduated. I kind of thought this would be cool, be a Marine officer, have those really neat dress blues, and then get a tour in the Mediterranean or some other exotic port. Obviously, it didn't turn out that way. After basic school, and I don't remember the exact percentage of my class, there were 200 of us in my class that got infantry officer MOS, but it was rather large. Those of us who got infantry MOS were sent straight over to Vietnam. Others went off to various schools before they would be sent to Vietnam. 68 was still part of the escalation. The troop levels were still going up. So I was sent to Vietnam as soon as I graduated from basic school, which would have been in December of 68, and I was over in Vietnam by January 69.
Do you remember anything about the trip?
I remember clearly being how hard it was to leave. My girlfriend and I had decided not to get married before I went into that kind of a situation, but we did get engaged. So that was a real tough Christmas time. We did have some get-togethers with friends. Left on out of Washington National Airport, which is now Reagan Airport, and that was hard, saying goodbye to my parents and my girlfriend at that time. And heading off, again, part of, I'm sure what you hear in these stories is it was basically a single rotation. We went as individuals. Something that I ended up thinking was a terrible idea, but that's the way it was done then. So I individually went from Washington, D.C. out to Camp Pendleton, and there I was given my first platoon. Actually, I was given a company, but that was just to go through some exercises, escape and evasion. I remember that class at Camp Pendleton, where we had to learn how to strip a snake and eat it raw and escape from the enemy and those kinds of things. So I basically, with some staff, led a company of people through that. And then I was assigned that same group of Marines on a bright yellow Braniff to fly to Vietnam with. So I was the officer in charge of this airplane full of troops. And that's one thing that I really recollect is we stopped in Hawaii. I think when we stopped in Okinawa. Actually, I got off in Okinawa. I had to go through some other training in Okinawa that they wanted me to go through before I went down to Vietnam. But flying into Vietnam was on this bright yellow airplane, flying into a combat zone, not knowing, if you're going to get shot at or not. And I felt like must have been quite a target. But it was uneventful going in.
What was your first impression of Vietnam?
Well, I was impressed all along. Interestingly, I just got together with some of the troops that I led in Vietnam. After 40 years, we saw each other for the first time. We were exchanging experiences. And I remembered the beauty of the country. It was just absolutely beautiful. As we saw the South China Sea, I kept thinking, what a great place for a hotel. And, the mountains out there to the west, I just thought it was beautiful. The troops never, as we were talking, never really appreciated the beauty of the country, but I was just taken by how pretty it was. It was hot. I do remember landing at Da Nang, and it wasn't necessarily hot then, but basically sitting on the airfield for 2 days. Well, I don't know what was going on to figure out where we were supposed to go, where my first assignment would be. So I spent 2 days there, and then I was sent out to Fox Company of the 2nd Battalion, the 1st Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division. Fox Company was located just south of Da Nang in a sandy area where our responsibility was to protect Da Nang in the airfield from rocket and mortar attacks from the VC and the North Vietnamese. So I went out to Fox Company, again going in as an individual, like we all did. I think there were 4 other troops that went to the company at the same time I did. And my first assignment was to lead the weapons platoon. And the weapons platoon had M60 machine guns, 60 millimeter mortars, various anti-tank firearms. But the interesting part about being a weapons platoon commander was all my troops were deployed to the field, assigned to various platoons in the company. My very first day as a new weapons platoon commander, I went out to visit where some of my troops were, and that very first day with my command, one of my guys shot his fingers off on a 60 millimeter mortar tube. He dropped the mortar in and then didn't remove his fingers fast enough. So I had a casualty my very first day in command. Now, that turns out interesting and kind of funny, but I was at a reunion 3 years ago, and there's a whole bunch of people from 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, and we were in the PX, and this guy comes over, and I just asked him, who were you with when you were there? He said, well, I was in weapons, and I was there in 1969. I said, weapons, huh? And I said, when? And he said, well, I was there January, February, and then I got medevaced. And I said, let me see your hand. Sure enough, it was him. We gave each other a big hug. He had gone through quite a bit of, actually quite a bit, 7 months worth of rebuilding of his hand from that wound. But anyway, so I lost my first guy my first day on the job. It was no more than 30 days as a weapons platoon commander when one of the other lieutenants of the 1st Platoon of Fox Company was wounded in an attack on a bridge. We were also responsibility for defending bridges in that area, road crossings across rivers. And there was a huge attack on one of the positions, and that platoon commander was wounded, and so he was airlifted out. The captain called me and said, get down there, you're now the 1st platoon commander. So that's how that transition took place. So as 1st platoon commander, then I had that platoon for, let's see, from February till the end of July, very 1st of August. I was in the field with that, with my platoon. As we started out, the things we did were to patrol. It was a sandy sand dune area, and our job was to patrol the area and, again, look for enemy positions, do nighttime ambushes, check vills out, occasionally set up a cordon around a vill while others would go in and search it. And the biggest thing we ran into, we had very few firefights. I think my first one was maybe 3 or 4 weeks after I took over the platoon, and we took no casualties in that one, were the mines and booby traps. It was just a constant psychological issue for all of us. I usually walked the 2nd or 3rd man back, have a point man, and then somebody between him, and then I would usually try to be up in that area. And I think we lost, fortunately not to severe injuries, but 2 or 3 point men in that first month, just to small C ration cans. that the enemy would put probably our own C4 or some kind of explosive or a hand grenade they'd roll up in there, and then somebody would step on it and cause injuries. So that was the major issue at that time. I was there 6 weeks and had gone over on one day and visited another battalion where two of my lieutenant from basic school were. They each had platoons, and they weren't 1,000 meters away from us, but in a different battalion. Let's see, I'd seen them actually 4 weeks. 2 weeks later, both of them were dead. A huge, huge firefight. We could hear the firefight. We were never called into support for that. And they're both killed in that one firefight. And I definitely remember thinking, I'm not sure I'm going to make it through this. Because actually the turnover rate among infantry lieutenants was very high. And as it turned out, I actually got through my whole tour without a scratch, and I've always felt extremely fortunate about that. We began a major operation called Pipestone Canyon. That and another one called Durham Peak were the only major operations that I was involved in during that time in the field. And those operations were really to sweep known enemy concentration areas. The North Vietnamese, the Viet Cong, actually, as I found out doing a Lest We Forget class, the VC had pretty well been decimated in Tet. Not a story that was very well publicized back here, and I didn't even realize it till much later. So we were up against North Vietnamese soldiers throughout that area. The objective of these operations was just to go sweep that whole territory, find bunkers, find stashes of ammunition, of food, clear it out, fight the enemy where you could corner them and get them to stay and fight.
What size of troops did we have there?
Pipestone Canyon was the entire division was moved out on that operation in various areas of responsibility. Now, again, I was a part of a battalion and a company within a battalion, and I was a platoon within the company. So we spent all summer. Interesting, again, researching the history. I've always thought our troops in Iraq really have had a tough time with the temperature, being 115 or whatever. And in reading the history, we were also fighting in 100 degree plus temperatures with a lot of humidity during the hot months in Vietnam. I went from about probably 180 pounds to 135 pounds during that summer of operations. And we were comparing pictures back at this reunion, and there wasn't a guy there with an ounce of fat on him. We all weighed 120 to 140 pounds. The enemy contact initially was very light. One day, my platoon found a cache of rice that was large enough to feed a North Vietnamese regiment for about 6 months. And so that, when you get something that big, call for the general to come out from the headquarters and we get pictures taken and things like that. Well, that required that I get a haircut. I mean, we've been out in the field for 30 days, and we were all a mess. And they had to set up a field barber. I was sitting on a bunch of sandbags or a bunch of rice bags with those hand clippers while they clipped my hair back. The troops loved it. They just thought it was the funniest thing to see me getting a haircut, all because the general was coming. But again, 40 years later, visiting with the guys, they were so proud of that find and the general coming out there and all that. So it turned out that it was pretty good. The, about July 14, I'm sorry, first major situation that we got into was still in the same operation, again, sweeping here, sweeping there, looking for things, blowing up bunkers. A observation post on a mountaintop spotted a Viet Cong platoon, literally 20 VC, running on a peninsula type area. And my platoon was told to get over there and get these guys. We'd be covered by the rest of the company on higher ground, but we were the ones who were going to go out onto this peninsula and sweep through and see if we could get these guys. We had elephant grass as tall as this ceiling, very thick, that we had to hack our way through. And I just never forget the frustration of the higher-ups. In fact, I got yelled at on the radio to hurry up and get my guys down there. At one point, the skipper told me that he was, if I didn't get going, and I was trying to explain, we've got this situation. It's one thing to look at it from up here, but down here it's different. He said, if you don't get going, I'm going to call an airstrike in on your position. And I thought I was going to get court-martialed for this. I never did, but I said, go screw yourself, and hung up the phone. And I didn't talk to him again through the rest of that operation. We killed 10 and captured 12 of that entire Viet Cong platoon. We took them out, and it was a major victory. At one point during that, I carried an M16. I wasn't going to be out there with a 45 up in the air, so I carried an M16 like the rest of the guys. And my only chance to use it was in that sweep. And I looked over in a bush, and there was an enemy soldier with a rifle pointed at me. And I quickly pulled the trigger on my weapon, and it misfired. It didn't fire. I don't know if the same thing happened to that enemy soldier or not, but I just yelled, somebody shoot him, and the guy on my right shot that guy, but I think his weapon must have jammed also. It was the only time I ever tried to use or fire in a combat situation, and my gun jammed. I was awarded a Bronze Star for that operation. We were wading in the river, pulling guys out. You've heard of them getting in the rivers and breathing through bamboo and things like that. And we extracted them one by one from the river. The firefight was actually pretty short. I don't even remember that part of it. I was just trying to get guys positioned. But I do remember very clearly this. Through all of the booby traps and casualties we had taken, the troops just didn't want to have any mercy. And I stopped what would have been a slaughter. I said, we're taking as many captives as we can. And I've been actually very proud of that from that day forward, but it was a tough decision because I wanted to just, frankly, to kill as many as we could. And it wasn't 2 weeks later that I guess we got the payback. This was an operation where they had spotted about 50, it says about 50 NVA in an area we call Dodge City, after Dodge City, Kansas, and the gun shooting. The Marine Corps named this one area Dodge City. And the whole battalion was lifting off because they had seen these 50 NVA in this area. And we, as part of that battalion, were going to set up a cordon, a blocking force. And another company was going to, our company was, and another company was going to sweep across and try to push them into us. As we tried to land in our LZ, it was extremely hot. We had 7 choppers that got hit. Our chopper got hit with machine gun fire. Now, oops, I'm out of the camera. In doing research for the Lest We Forget class, I was reading this book, Semper Fi Vietnam, from Da Nang to the DMZ Marine Corps Campaigns, 1965 to 1975. And I came across a description of what turned out to be the fight that I was in. As the troop-laden CH-46 came into the LZs, all took heavy enemy fire. 7 were hit and 1 was forced to make an emergency landing. Fortunately, it was near a Korean Marine position. The Koreans were the next blocking force down from us. At 2 of the LZs, the enemy fire was so strong the helicopters were forced to divert to alternate landing zones. This caused a 1-hour delay in establishing a cordon around the abandoned village of Tay Bang An, which was believed to harbor the enemy. They were definitely there because they had shot up our helicopter. We dropped back behind a railroad berm, and we formed up, and then we were to sweep into that area. So we were on line, and according to this, by mid-morning, all 4 companies of the battalion had engaged the enemy. Company F, my company, had the hardest time, losing 2 dead and 7 wounded to machine gun fire and RPGs as they neared the village's western edge. And that was my firefight, or our firefight. We were the point of the company as we were coming across, and that enemy bunker. The thing that amazed me and gave me a lot of respect for the NVA was that there were 4 of them left to take on what amounted to an entire battalion. And in a bunker, they wiped out 1/3 of my platoon, 2 KIAs. Actually, was actually more than that wounded. I had to send 2 guys out of the field because they lost it mentally in that fight. And so you think about it, it made me think back to our guys in the South Pacific during World War II and how in the world they took bunkers day after day after day, because 4 guys could take out 1/3 of them in a Marine platoon. So I sat in the medevac zone. One of my guys died right there, virtually right next to me. And I think of that every day. There isn't a day that goes by that you don't think of a situation like that. We set up the cordon eventually. That was another time. 3 of the enemy were killed right off, and then 1 came out with his hands up. And you can imagine how we all wanted him dead. And again, I stepped up and said, no. He's going back. So we put him on a chopper and sent him back. One of the interesting things, kind of funny out of that, one of my troops made stars and stripes with a photograph because he got hit by the machine gun. It was our machine gunner on Charlie Squad, got hit right in the helmet with a machine gun bullet. That bullet went around the back of his helmet, inside his helmet liner, and down the back of his neck, and burned him on the back of his neck. Now, I medevaced him. He was gone for a few days, just from the shock of getting shot in the head, but having fortunately survived it. The last part of my infantry tour, or that 6 months in the field, we were sweeping. We finally got to go in the mountains. You hear about single canopy and double canopy, and we had just been in the sand dunes and stuff my whole 5 months at that point. And in late July, another operation started, Durham Peak, and we were sent to go to the Quay San Mountains south of Da Nang. I think they're the first mountain line you can see looking south from Da Nang, about 10 kilometers south of Hoi An. And we had to fight our way up into these mountains. Fight our way wasn't with enemy. They were sniping at us, but not fighting, but just going through the undergrowth and so forth. And we get to the top, and there it starts a huge firefight. on the hill right across from us. It was, actually very steep to go down to the next hill and back up. And the company, hotel company, that's also in this book, I found it. We dug in our positions, and all we could do was watch this fight go on. They took 6 dead, 16 casualties, a helicopter shot down, a Cobra pilot that I witnessed and wrote up for Navy Cross or whatever, who sat his chopper right, the NVA were in a dug-in position on the top of a ridge, and he sat his chopper right in front of him. Literally, there was a gunfight between that chopper pilot and a whole bunch of NVA, and he really suppressed their fire so they could get the guys out. Well, that set the stage then for the night that I was most frightened in Vietnam. We knew the enemy was there, and they were there in large numbers, and it was a very windy night, and our flares would go off occasionally because of the wind. We were all spooked, so occasionally we're trained not to shoot. It gives away your position, but to throw a hand grenade. So we had guys throwing hand grenades out all night. And then at midnight, we started taking artillery fire right on our position. It turned out it was friendly artillery fire. They had actually set up a fire base to support this operation right down at the bottom of the hill, and it was supposed to be harassing and interdiction fire from the mountains behind us. And of course, our mountain was here, the other mountain was probably out here, and the fire was supposed to go over the top, and they had read it wrong, and instead it was coming right into our positions on top of the hill. Fortunately, I guess because we were all so scared, we were dug in really deep. We didn't take a single casualty. I got hurt. The only scrape I got in the entire situation, I ran to check positions after the artillery hit, and I tripped and fell on a rock, and I scraped my knee. So I got the artillery fire shut off, and then at 3 a.m. they did it again. I don't know if they had changed shift and forgot to put in the new fire order. And of course, that time I was screaming at the top of my lungs, cursing people to get it stopped. Now, the reason I mentioned that was my last night in the field with my guys. And it was unceremonious. And the way they did things, I just don't think was that smart. And I found out from these 8 guys that I just was with that they really were set back when the next morning was the end of my tour in the bush, and I had been promoted to a battalion Civic Action Officer. I got lifted off the next morning, and they were left without a platoon commander on that hilltop. It was hard for all of us. I went back 2 weeks later to the battalion, their battalion headquarters, and they were deployed to the field, so I literally didn't see any of those guys for 40 years. It was great to be at the reunion, though, and hug all of them and recognize and think about how proud I was to have been with them, and for them to have covered my butt as well as they did.
So during that 5-6 months out in the field, it was pretty steady. Did you
There was
chance for
actually
any time out or time out?
there was no time out during my 5 months. Now, we would send some of the guys back to in-country R&R at a place called China Beach, where there was a Navy club, an Army club. I don't remember if there's Air Force guys there, Marine pilots and so forth. But I never got an in-country R&R. Didn't necessarily want one, but psychological battle, certainly. I do remember one time the company next to us or on our flank, and we were doing a sweep, and they hit a tree line. We're walking through a tree line, and it was booby-trapped with 3 155 shells, shells that killed about 6 people like that. And just knowing that could be there any minute. you did, I did finally become pretty fatalistic about it. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And you just went and did your job. We were very fortunate. We talked about this at our reunion. We had a guy, in fact, nobody could even remember his name as we talked 40 years later. We just knew him as the old man. He was probably 26, and the rest of us were 18 and 23. He was our point man for 4 months after we had gone through several. He was just outstanding. He never missed a beat. We never took a casualty from a booby trap when he was on point. So he had those kinds of individuals that just were just really sharp. By the way, back to the bunker that we took, I wanted to mention this. One guy ended up, we were pretty much pinned down and trying to fire back, and I had maneuvered troops to try to flank the bunker. But before we could even pull that up, one guy went and took out that bunker. True heroism, never asked for a thing, very quiet about it, and to this day have marveled about how one guy could get up through machine gun fire like that and single-handedly take out a bunker. He did it with a grenade. But true heroism, and I wrote him up for a Silver Star for that. And still investigating whether he got it or not. Because again, you got this separate thing coming and going, and my gathering with the guys a few weeks ago, we started finally getting to put notes together. We haven't located him, so I don't know if he actually got the medal or not.
During this time in the field, when you weren't on patrol or guard duty or whatever, what did you do for entertainment?
Well, cards. I forget the name of the card game. They told it to me a couple weeks ago. Lots of card games. I think some of the troops gambled. Whatever pay they got was gone within the first couple of days. Music was big. When we were in an area where, in the battalion rear, which you were always kind of on guard, lots of boom boxes and music was playing. Writing letters home was about it. Our mail was a little spotty while we were out on maneuvers. You couldn't write sometimes for a week or two. I always tried to get the guys to write. I thought it was really important. The people sitting back home, it's going to take 2 weeks to get a letter anyway. Really important that people write and keep up the communication.
Did you get letters pretty regularly?
Yeah, we did. One of the really neat things was our first sergeant for the company made sure that we got a mail drop every day we could out in the field, no matter where we were. And also what came with that were 2 cans of beer, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, for each troop. And occasionally, they were reminding me, they would send out ice cream, which would be basically slop by the time we got it, but it was much appreciated.
What kind of beer?
I hate to admit it, but we were drinking PBR and Schlitz, which I think are probably 2 of the worst beers in the entire world, but boy, they tasted good.
How about care packages?
Yeah, most times care packages would get to us. They were either melted together, glommed together, in some cases damaged, moldy food. But occasionally one would get through, and the guys really would share it, especially with the guys closest around.
How's morale out there?
Well, that became an issue while I was there in 1969. No hiding from it. The situation with the black power stuff really started to get boil up. It was really sad because when you go into the Marine Corps, I think everybody would say it, or probably the Army or any of the military, you're put into a barracks with guys from all different walks of life, all colors, and you learn that you're one, and you learn to get along. But over there, as the morale started to deteriorate, the black Marines would actually segregate themselves. For the most part. There were some who didn't fall into that. And of course, they're always doing the fist bumping, and it became kind of a requirement that they have to be part of that pack. I remember clearly, we were in a battalion rear, so to speak. By the way, battalion rears got overrun 2 or 3 times while I was there, so I'd rather have been out in the field. So it wasn't necessarily safe. And the staff and officers were called one night to put their firearms, their sidearms on, and patrol the battalion compound because there was a threat, the word was out there was going to be some kind of a racial riot. And so here we are in a combat zone, the staff and officers having to patrol it because we've got troops that are unruly. The same thing happened back in Camp Lejeune when I got back to the States. Troops were troops were fragging officers in some cases, but also trying to frag themselves. There was the $1 million wound, they would call it. Throw a frag into a bunker or whatever and turn around and see if you could get lucky enough to just take one piece of shrapnel in your backside and get out of country. That was, in fact, when I was doing the Lest We Forget history, that's the time I got choked up the most, was as I was going through the part, and in the history book it says in 1969 the morale started to drop. Lots of reasons for that. I think we definitely felt handcuffed in terms of being able to pursue the enemy wherever they were and then occupy where you had just taken. We gave lots of blood to take a hill or an area and then go back to the battalion rear and then have to go back time and time again. Again, the mines and booby traps psychologically worked on you, and so the morale really started to plummet. It was up to, in my opinion, the staff and the officers to keep it going. I remember one day, it was the day after we got our butts handed to us, and it was 2-3 days later, we were walking out of that area to go get on trucks, and the troops were just absolutely dragging. They're kicking the dirt and dragging their heads and everything, and I just said, guys, we can't be like this. Okay, we got our butts kicked, but we got to keep on going. And we literally had to pick them up and say, let's go, we'll have another chance at this. So yeah, morale was bad. You go up to the PX in Da Nang, and there was always a gathering of the blacks outside of the PX in Da Nang, bumping fists and doing all that stuff. It was just not at all a good situation, and it seemed to get worse as time went on.
During that period in the field, did you have much contact with the local people?
No, we really didn't. I mean, we had contact with them, but it wasn't necessarily in a friendly way. We tried to be friendly, but we'd have to go into vills and we'd sweep the vills. We always took candy with us for the kids and stuff like that. But I guess we had lots of contact. Well, regarding a bridge, we had lots of contact with the civilian populace. But as I became a Civic Action Officer in my last 6 months, I got a chance to have an entirely different type of contact.
When are we going to that now?
As I left the field, my promotion was to become a battalion civil affairs Civic Action Officer with 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, located in Hill 55, outside the village of Dai Lak, south of Da Nang. And there my responsibilities were to hold medical programs out in the villages, dental programs. I was able to build, while I was there, 2 new school rooms, not schoolhouses. But as as you would look at a school room, there'd probably be 50 kids in it, and we built some more school rooms for the kids in the local area. We had the kids in the area come to the battalion headquarters. We had parties and things for them. I was able to, another responsibility was to hire civilians to work on the base. I was the damage claims officer, so that if we damaged a Vietnamese civilian's vehicle or something like that, or their field or their water buffalo, I would arrange for the compensation for that. They weren't always happy about that, but we tried our best. I was also the psychological operations officer, so I arranged for those leaflet drops, asking the enemy to chew hoy or to give up and come in and go to the other side. I had a interpreter assigned to me, had a little office. There were 3 of us, is all there were. Had an interpreter. I hired his girlfriend onto the base, and they eventually got married while I was there in that last 6 months, so I got to attend their wedding. One of the interesting things was the older people got a real kick. See, there was myself, the battalion physician, the battalion dentist were at this wedding, and they got a real kick. They gave us betel nut to try. The betel nut was this black nut that you always saw the older Vietnamese women chewing as they were out in the field. And we had tiger beer. And one of the interesting things to me was that the troops never got on to the fact that betel nut was kind of a narcotic. And combined with tiger beer, it kind of numbed you all over. So we had a really good time. And the Vietnamese people had just a ball laughing at us trying their betel nut at the wedding. So I befriended the local PF popular force leaders. There was a Catholic priest that I want to talk about in a minute, who had a parish right in the village or the hamlet of Dai Loc. He actually was North Vietnamese, and he was educated in France. And during the 50s, when there was this mass exodus as the communists took over in North Vietnam, this priest fled to the south so that he could have a Roman Catholic church. And he and I became very good friends. One of the toughest situations I do want to mention is that I had to medevac probably 15 women and children one day. He was having a festival in his churchyard, and a Viet Cong sapper came up and parked a bicycle by the fence and left and blew up the yard where women and children were. That was a tactic the VC used. We don't hear so much about their terrorism back here in this country. I watched various leaders be assassinated, people occasionally kidnapped, and then this kind of a sapper attack on a schoolyard where there was a little festival. So I felt really that I was able to do some good in that last position that I had. It turned out that a lot of what happened there kind of, I think, carried me over the years in feeling somewhat positive as opposed to totally negative about the situation that we found ourselves in Vietnam. As I was leaving the country, that Vietnamese priest actually came up to me and said thank you. It was literally a thank you to the country. He said, "I fled for the freedom of religion. We know we don't have the best leadership, but at least you're trying to give us a chance for the freedoms that we want." And that statement right there has carried me for years, that there was some appreciation for what we were trying to do.
Any other memorable stories from Vietnam?
There's lots of them, but I could go on forever. I guess one of them, yeah, another one, back to the infantry experience. We were at the tail end of another sizable operation, and my platoon was the very last platoon to be pulled out. And we were being taken out by CH-53, which is the big Jolly Green Giant, we called it. Big helicopter, rotor on top and a little one in the back. And we were in the landing zone. They had evacuated the entire battalion, and the helicopter pilot came in, and he was hot dogging it. And he dropped the tail rotor into the ground, which broke off. It flipped the chopper. All the rest of the blades broke off. The chopper flipped upside down, and then started, caught on fire. So all the rounds started cooking off. And this thing, we got everybody out of the chopper, and this thing sat there and burned for about 2 hours with these huge flames and ammunition going off. And then the call came. Let's see, I had already sent one squad back. I had 2 squads left, so there was, they weren't even full squads, probably 20 of us that were told to stay and guard the site of the chopper crash overnight. And that was another time I was pretty darn scared. I think we all were. We dug ourselves in and we surrounded that chopper site, knowing that you could have seen this thing burn and rounds going off for miles and miles around. So we thought we were pretty certain we were going to get hit that night. We didn't, and we were taken out the next day. But that was just another happening.
Did you get to see any entertainment while you were in Vietnam?
I didn't. I sent some of the guys in from time to time. We never got to see one of the big shows while I was there. But there were other smaller shows that would come in. And I got a picture of one of the shows that one of the guys gave me. And they were always really pleased to be able to go to a show like that. But they were sitting there in the mud, in the rain, but still enjoying the chance to get out of the field a little bit.
You never had regular R&R?
I did have R&R. In fact, I met my fiance in Hawaii. It was actually right after I took the Civic Action job was my scheduled R&R. And she almost fainted when she saw me because, again, it was the end of that operation, and I went from 180 to 130 something. But I had a 30-inch waist. That was pretty good.
How long were you on R&R?
Just a week. In fact, that triggers another memory. Coming back from R&R, that plane was totally silent. I remember clearly thinking that I was not going to come back. That I, for whatever reasons, I had been fortunate, but I wasn't going to make it out of Vietnam. And I think everybody on that plane was pretty depressed having to go back.
Do you remember anything about your trip back?
Trip back, yeah. I was sent to Okinawa first. We had to turn our gear in. I heard one of the other guys commenting how ticked off they got at having their gear gone through. I wasn't even allowed to keep my jungle boots, and I've never forgotten this. I had worn those jungle boots, and they were scarred up like they're supposed to be, and some guy in supply back in Okinawa was taking them away from me, saying, "Sir, you can't have these." So I at that time, I wasn't ready to fight anybody, so I left them there, but I've been ticked about that ever since. We went to the officers club, the Air Force Officers Club at Kadena Air Base in Okinawa. And I was with about 4 other Marine officers, infantry officers, and about 6 helicopter pilots in this O Club. And I got to hand it to the Air Force colonels. They're probably all B-52 pilots, but we were just tanked. We had a party. We took over the stage, the microphone. We were singing and giving them hell for never seeing a war below 50,000 feet. And they didn't bother us. They didn't throw us out. It was great. But the shock of going from a combat zone to the relative peace was just about overwhelming to me. Obviously, you're very thankful that you made it out safely. I stayed there like 3 days, I think, and before the next plane out, the Freedom Bird, as we called it. I landed in El Toro, and then took a civilian flight back to Dulles Airport, Washington, D.C., where my girlfriend or fiance and my parents met me. It was, all I can say, it was surreal. It was absolutely surreal to come without any chance to, vent or figure things out from that kind of a situation right back to the States, and there you are with your folks and not quite sure how to act. Certainly that's when I started packing things down, packing it away, pushing it down. One of the joyous things about my homecoming was that while I was in Vietnam, I had gotten up to the PX in Da Nang and picked up the brochures of the cars that were being made back in the States. And the first thing I did, because I'd saved my money while I was there, was I went out and bought a 1969 Dodge Charger. And my wife-to-be actually turned out not too happy about it, because she was thinking we should have a station wagon because we're going to have kids. But that was really a joyous thing. And then we got married, actually. I got home in the end of January. We were married by March. Subsequent to that, I was one, and this is sad to say, Marine Corps officer, combat experienced, proud as hell when I went in, and so ticked off at this country when I got back that I clearly remember saying I would never let a kid of mine serve in the United States military. I felt the rug was pulled on us. I was ticked off at Kennedy for getting us into it. I was really ticked off at Johnson for the way he mishandled things and wouldn't back us up and wouldn't let us go fight. I was just ticked off at the entire system. I was very angry, but had to pack that away. I was at a dance, tried a formal dance with my wife, tried to wear my formal, I did wear my formal uniform, and somebody, I put the cover in the coat area, my cover hat, and somebody took that hat and took it in the parking lot and stomped all over it. And I probably would have been in jail for 40 years if I had gotten my hands on it. But that's what was going on. Another time at Camp Lejeune, I had a company in ITR at Camp Lejeune. That's infantry training of the privates after they come from boot camp. And they had us on the tarmac at Camp Lejeune to go to Columbia University because of riots that were going on at Columbia University. And we were on the tarmac ready to go up there, and I think it's a really good thing that we never had to go, because I'm just not sure it would have been a good idea to have a bunch of guys back from Vietnam go up to Columbia University and have those students try to stick a flower in the ends of our rifles. Marines are disciplined, but it still would have been extremely hard. So I was really glad that we didn't have to go do that. And I stayed pretty angry until the wall. The wall was my healing point. I went there right away. And the parade in Chicago, the Welcome Home Parade they finally had. And that's when I finally started working through it. I went for some psychological counseling, not necessarily related, because we didn't know what PTSD was for the longest time, but to the anger issues that I came back with, and the fact that I just didn't appreciate authority very much. I remember clearly, I actually became very successful. I was a vice president of human resources at Whirlpool Corporation. So I didn't have those kinds of outward issues that would cost you a career or anything. But I was traveling. I was in Kansas City, Missouri, and went into a bar, and there were these kids, 22, 23-year-old kids, just having a ball. And that's when it really struck me what we had given up in our youth. We didn't have that. We were off at 19, 20, 21 years of age, fighting a war that nobody appreciated. And that whole part of our lives was taken away from us. So that was hard. Recently I went for, because some of the guys are just now starting to deal with PTSD. Some of the guys in my platoon, 40 years later. Others fortunately have, or unfortunately have dealt with it earlier. So I went to the VA. One of them recommended that I go to the VA. And I talked to the counselor over there, and I've had issues. But she said, well, officers don't typically have PTSD. You're borderline, but officers don't, because they had more control than the troops had. And I thought, well, you know, I'm not out for anything, so if that's your opinion, that's your opinion. But it occurred to me that an officer, especially an infantry officer with troops that they're responsible for, and especially as a second lieutenant, I didn't have control over shit. I was told, go here, do this. And so anyway, I think they're misinformed on that issue. But that's where that saga ends. So the wall, I think, is just fabulous. I was just back there with our guys. We laid some plaques by the wall for the guys that we lost. Very cathartic. I ran into some guys from 1st Air Cav who had never been there before, and just hugged them, and it was fabulous.
How much time did you spend in the States after Vietnam, the military?
I was in a total of 3 years, so 68 to 1971. It was my active duty, and then I had 3 more years of reserve time. That's when I was promoted to captain in the reserves. But I never really went active in the reserves, so I was out by 1971.
Where were you stationed in the States?
Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. That's where I had an infantry company,
okay.
and then I was recruited from there right up to Whirlpool Corporation. We're actually from Washington, D.C., but that's how we ended up in Benton Harbor, Michigan.
In the military, what would you say was the worst moment?
The worst moment was that day, July the 14th, 1969. Absolutely a horrible day. I don't care what anybody says, you just don't forget. It's always, it comes up in various ways.
In the best time?
That situation. The best time. It's too bad I have to think about that. I think the best time was when my wife and I were engaged. I had first gone in. We went to our first Marine Corps ball. I was a young officer and proud as hell, and that was really, really a neat evening. You're there with one of the generals is there cutting the cake. Marine Corps birthday, by the way, is really special. Even no matter where you are, you celebrate the birthday. And that was probably a highlight of my career. I was really very proud to have been a Marine officer, no question about it.
What kind of effect did the military have on you in the rest of your life?
I will tell you that I credit my success in civilian life to what the Marine Corps showed me I could actually do. We did things in boot camp, did things in Vietnam you never thought you could do. You just reached down somewhere and found something to make you keep on. And so when you get back and have to make a big presentation in front of the officers of a corporation, you sit there and think, I mean, you always get nervous when you're making presentations, but you kind of can work that through the back of your mind. I've seen a lot worse than this, so this will be fine. This stick-to-itiveness and being able to accomplish more than you ever think you can.
Any last statements? Any other stories?
No, just that just the one thing This is supposed to be a history, but I'm really concerned. I came back, I was upset at the Senate and the Congress for not backing us. I was very upset at John Kerry. It's okay to be a pacifist, but to get in front of the Senate and badmouth us. I'm seeing the same kind of crap happening again, and that's very disturbing. I think we've been very proud of our troops and what we were trying to do over there for several years, which has felt really good. It's brought my patriotism back. But damn it if we pull the rug on these guys again. I'm going to be pissed. That's my final comment.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank
Welcome
you.
home.
Thank you, same to you.